Welcome to Morning Joe with Tom, with your host, Thomas Chappell. Get ready to listen to real-life stories from inspiring leaders who have overcome incredible challenges to rise to the occasion. If you're ready to add some pep to your morning with a new outlook on leadership, then grab your cup of coffee. It's time to be inspired. Here's your host, Thomas Chappell.
Hey, Wendy. How you doing today?
Hey, Tom, I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you're here today and look forward to a great conversation. For all the listeners out there, Wendy was actually one of my instructors as I was going through a coaching class. And I actually really enjoyed the coaching process with her. It was challenging for me, but I actually grew a lot through that process and really kind of learned how that you approach leadership and coaching and kind of make it work with everybody kind of walking away like they got some sort of value. But Wendy, I think I would really love it if you could kind of help our listeners get to know you a little bit better.
All right. Well, I am excited to be here with everyone. I'm an executive and leadership coach. I'm based in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, but I've spent a lot of time in Texas and Chicago and Philadelphia and other places. I came into coaching. I mean, everyone has their unique story. I was actually an electrical engineer by training, then went to business school and worked for Procter Gamble for a number of years in marketing or brand management, as they call it, and sales. And then also am married and have 3 kids, 2 on earth, 1 in heaven, which is all part of my story. But as my kids were growing up, I felt like I wanted to have a different kind of impact. P&G was an amazing company. I learned so much, but I wanted to work more personally and help people live more intentionally. And so I switched over into coaching and really it's just really a privilege to work with leaders on leading themselves and leading others so that they can have the impact that they want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate that. And I think that was one of the things that kind of led this kinship with you, because we've both been there with losses of children. So you really kind of helped me through a tough time that I was going through. So I really appreciate that.
Yes. Well, that's all part. It's all part of what we do for others, and in the workplace or in places, just being a companion or helping each other and encouraging each other along the way. And as we talk about this idea even of emotions in the workplace, there's hard things that happen to ourselves or to other people, and how do we get through those?
Yeah. So speaking of that, I'm really interested in hearing the process that you kind of go through whenever you're working through that with someone, and how do you work through all of that internally for yourself at the end of the day?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's interesting because as leaders, I'm interested in what people are bringing into leadership coaching, so we're not counseling, we're not looking back into hard, deep things and healing from trauma. But yet, because we're human beings, we can't isolate ourselves. So stuff happens, as you and I, we've dealt with the loss of a child, or you have other really significant things that happen. It could be something going on in your marriage or with your health or in your finances or with other close relationships you have, or with a child. And, we can't help but bring these things in our mind and into the space where we are. And so I think for people and for myself, I think the first thing it's just coming to having a piece about, like, it's okay to have feelings, because some of us have grown up and we might come from our family of origin, and we may have been taught that we need to stuff that. We need to not talk about it. We need to just either be a positive and be, oh, not forget it ever happened, or just put a good face on it and move on. And that actually just causes more harm than good.
Hmm. So how do you approach situations like that with leaders?
Yeah. Well, I think usually it's, first of all, just helping people to start to slow down, to identify like what's going on. Like, what are you feeling? Because some people were disconnected from our feelings, and just to name it, like, okay, I'm frustrated. I'm really irritated. I'm really ticked at this person, or whatever it is. Like, just name it. And sometimes I'll even work with people with, like, a feelings wheel. Like, just like, come up. There's a great tool online called Feelings Wheel, and you just like name what's the feeling you're really feeling. But then we've got to be able to shift and calm ourselves, because we're not going to be able to show up to any kind of interactions with other people or at work if we're in this fight flight place in our brain, and we're just like, oh, I'm so upset, I'm so ticked at this, I'm so angry at this person. Blah. And so it's just that sense of helping people learn to just self-soothe and just calm their brain, so that we're not in that amygdala, that emotion based part of our brain, but that we can get to that smart prefrontal cortex and be like, connect with what we really want to do and who we really are. And so honestly, mindful breathing, just like that, slowing our breathing down, really, I think it's the first thing to just connect with ourselves and get out of this. The emotion base is based response of the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And breathing really does help with that, kind of calm you and kind of center you to where you can kind of stop being phonetic thinking, but, start thinking more. And I have to say that somebody that has a recovering anger bomb that would just blow up on people, I have had to do that a lot, because unfortunately, as a business owner, you end up having to have a lot of difficult conversations throughout the process. And you can't really afford to be losing your cool like that. You don't keep employees, and customers hear that, they don't want to do business with you. You just become, lost after a while. So I'm kind of really interested in folks that are really kind of willing to kind of work toward that. What kind of programs do you help them install for themselves so that they can not become robotic, but it can become more of a process that first they acknowledge it and walk through it normally, but then it becomes like part of their memory, muscle memory type?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And we work with just first slowing down, breathing, a lot of trying to get into the moment. And so sometimes it's even connecting with what you're seeing right around you, grounding yourself. Like, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I touching? What I want you to be right here, not what's going to happen when you get home or what just happened. Like, I want you to be right here. So then, as we can get to that place, so now we're calm. We have a gap, we have a space. And now we can use that and go like, okay, let me like reassess this situation. And so what I'll work with people on, and we sort of create these as we coach together, but like, what are some questions I can ask myself in that moment that might help me get another perspective on this situation? And so it might be like, hey, what assumptions might I be making right now? And are they reflecting the whole picture, or are they just focusing on maybe one negative part of the picture?
Yeah.
So, that's one question, because a lot of times we all make assumptions, and we're going to assume what someone else is going to do or what they're thinking. And honestly, we don't really know, because we don't know the future.
Yeah, I think I remember during our coaching process, you used to ask me on that, because I had a habit of kind of assuming where we were kind of going and then trying to steer it. And so I
Mm-hmm.
remember the cautionary tales of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And whether it's in coaching or whether, we're having a difficult conversation, because we do a lot of coaching around people don't want to have a difficult conversation. There's a lot of emotion around it. So they might avoid it. And a lot of that's because they have this whole story in their head about how it's going to go, what the other person is going to say, what's going to happen. And so then they might go in, all armored up in a certain way. And that's because they're all based on these assumptions they have.
Right. So when you're having these difficult conversations, I've seen a lot of different views and takes on this. What are your thoughts on trying to create an atmosphere where it's overly relaxed during that process? What has been your experience with such
Yeah.
things?
And so it's interesting because some people will use humor to diffuse a difficult situation. And I think that's one of those things we have to be careful with. Because it's fine to, hey, good humor it connects us. We relax, we enjoy that. But we have to make sure that we're not coming across to jokey and to like, we're not honoring the seriousness of the situation. And so I think helping someone feel comfortable and emotionally safe, like, hey, it's, I'm seeing you, I'm valuing you, I'm caring about what's important to you, but also not making it so that we're minimizing the importance of either what we're saying or what they might be feeling. I think that's really important. Yeah.
All right. So what is it that you would give that for the practical leader to kind of like say 3 steps or 5 steps, whatever it is that they need to kind of before they interact with the situation?
Well, I think it's good to, like, as I said, do some breathing, slow yourself down, check your assumptions. What am I assuming? What are other explanations for the situation? So this is asking yourself some questions. What are other situations? If I were to survey other people, how would they interpret this situation?
Really
Or what advice would I give a colleague in this situation? Because sometimes we just need to get a little distance on it, because we're trying to come up with a more balanced thought around the situation that's just not all wrapped up in our emotion. And so we might want to look, asking ourselves some of these questions, and then honestly, like, what is the one best thing? What's best next? What's the one next thing I need to do? Because sometimes we can get so caught up in, oh, this and that, I'm so frustrated. And it's like, what's one thing I need to do right now? And if we can then, focus on that, but we've named the emotion, we felt it, we're not trying to stuff it, but at the same time, we're challenging our assumptions and our thinking a little bit so that we're not just attached to the first story that comes up in our brain. Because our brain's wired for story, and we want it to all make sense, and we want to move on because we are busy people. And so sometimes, though, that first story that comes up, that's not actually very accurate. So we need to challenge it, just like we would challenge a story or something that somebody's going to bring us at work. Like, and be like, oh, really? Well, tell me more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So where have you really kind of experienced a situation to where, because sometimes leaders just get stuck and there doesn't seem to be a way out, what would you recommend for them to kind of do? I mean, if they're already in the conversation?
Yeah, I think at that point, and that's such a great question, because like sometimes we're like, all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, like, and we realize the conversation has really gone south. We are now, things are happening, or we hear ourselves saying something, and we're like, oh, wow. And I think at that point, it's okay to push pause and just say, whoo, I'm sensing there's a lot of emotion around here. I am feeling a lot of emotion. I'm sensing you might be feeling some too. I'm wondering if we might take a pause, like push pause, and maybe come back to this conversation. Let's schedule a time to come back to it. And so this isn't, it's not, we're not going to go away and pretend it never happened. But we're going to address it, but at a time when we're both in a better space to be able to do that. And I think this applies also in our personal relationships, because sometimes, we'll hear that like, oh, I shouldn't let the sun go down on my anger. I need to handle this. And yes, we do, but we don't always have to handle it right then. Because if we are so in an emotional space that we're going to say or do things that we might really regret, like, better take a pause. Just call the pause, like call the time out and go think about it. So then you can think, and then you can connect too with who do you really want to be in that situation? What really matters in that situation? And you can connect with your values rather than just going with your emotion and your pride and, oh, I feel so, and I can't believe they said that. And, but then you can be like, okay, no, what really matters? What does success look like in this conversation? Well, actually, it looks like preserving the relationship. It looks like this. I want to be, maybe the father or the mother that I really feel called to be. I want to be who God's calling me to be. Like, I want to connect with really the bigger picture. And if you're in the middle of an emotional trigger, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah. You bring up a very good point on that. So, I've got a lot of young leaders that are in my listening cast here. And what are some nuggets of wisdom that you would give to them as they're growing? Because they're usually over small teams, and it gets very familiar on small teams. It's very easy to do so. But what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and I've been in that too. When I was a younger leader, you have a smaller group of people, and then and so I think it's creating that sense of where it's a safe place on your team to be able for people to be able to share. Not that we're not trying to make team meetings therapy sessions, not at all, but we're just trying to make it where, hey, it's okay for someone to say, I don't know how to do this. Or, I lost my father last week and I'm really not totally here and I'm struggling. Or, I think that call with such and such a customer, it didn't go so well. And I think I need to go back and do some repair, and so we want to be able to create a space where when somebody share something hard, we're not going to come down and judge. We're not going to tell them to be quiet. We're not going to look at them and stare like they're like what are you talking about? Like, we're just going to we're going to roll with what they're, and respond to them as a human being, and ask them what support they might need in that. And it might be support. We're not supposed to be their support for everything, but just to help connect them. Maybe there's resources. Maybe they need, some extra support on a project or whatever, just to connect with them. I think having that, it's interesting. Empathy as a leader is often not fully understood. We think of that means like I'm coming along. So, am I babying you or coddling you? Like, no, it's just empathy just means I'm trying to I have a sense of maybe how you might be feeling. And I'm just trying to express that. Yes. And it's actually a very powerful leadership skill to just be able to be empathetic. It doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean you think they're right. It doesn't mean any of that. It's just like you're helping your people just feel seen.
Yes, I've been through that myself, and I'll tell you a dynamic that I'm realizing, because I'm an older guy now. So, and I'm finding that I go in and get brought in as, some sort of fulfilling some sort of special period. But oftentimes I'm the oldest person in the room. And I see that some of these younger leaders, they have a real struggle with like how to kind of manage that relationship. So you got any thoughts on something like that for managing old guys like me?
I think, and first of all, I think that it goes both ways, because as an older person, I put myself in that category too. Like, we also have to be able to be humble and teachable, because we can learn just as much from a younger leader as we can from an older leader, as they can learn from us. So I think when we have the attitude that, like, every single human being has something I can learn from, there's something positive, that I think that is, that gives us a humility and a sense of just honoring the humanness of another person, and I respect them.
Yeah.
I do also think, that if we're really, if it feels like the elephant in the room, I also am a fan of just going in and having the direct conversation, and I've done that. I've managed some people in my day that were, much more senior and seasoned than I have. And so, depending on your rapport and that situation, you can also say, "Hey, Jim, you've got a lot of, you got a lot of years, and you've been here, and I respect what you're bringing to the party. And I know I'm recognizing, like, I'm not a senior, but obviously I'm in a leadership role. I think we can both learn from each other." And and approaching it, like, so say, and how are you feeling about that, Jim? Like, as I'm managing you, and here's how, here's how I'm feeling. And let's just, how can we do this together? Let's try to learn. Let's try to grow. Let's call things out. If you're feeling uncomfortable with something, or you feel like you have some wisdom to bring to the situation, hey, come forward.
I think part of the art of the elder, as I call it, is to kind of say, hey, I'm here to help support and help. I'm willing to give you what little knowledge I have. If you ever need it, you can ask me for it. It's freely given. But I found that, at least in my situation, where I'm going out on contracts like that to work, I find that it's just being very humble about the situation and say, it's and I said this not too long ago, it's one team, one fight. I'm not the star, I'm not the quarterback, you're running the team, you're leading the team. So I'm here to play a support role, whatever that is, and I call it the cock in the windowsill test. Nobody knows that you're there until the cock is removed, and then the wind comes through on a cold winter's day.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great word picture, and I love that, because I think that's we need to come in, if we're, as a more senior, or like in age, person, just come in with humility and vulnerability and openness, and be like, because we can always learn. Man, the day I stop learning, I can't imagine what I'm going to do, because, and so I can always learn from someone else. And I think when we come in with that sort of, common mission, common focus on learning and growth, I just think it makes things, we just can achieve more together.
Yep. And I think that if you really care about people and your people personality, that you will find that this comes more naturally, because you want to have that gooiness together,
right,
of the team. And so, it gives you a chance to play that. So, and I got to play this role a lot lately, not just lately, but all the way back to my Marine Corps days. I was the oldest in the barracks, and, all the way forward to today, where now I'm brought in for short-term missions, and I'm here to kind of like, hey, I'm here to help. What do you need? So yeah, I really appreciate that. So we're getting close to wrapping things up here, but I wanted to ask a question about, what are the books that you're currently reading today that you think that leaders should at least take a pause and take a read through?
Oh my goodness, I always have so many books. On this topic of emotions in the workplace, I would say Emotional Agility by Susan David. She's a Harvard researcher. and psychologist, and she's got some great stuff around just managing emotions in the workplace, and in life. I am really enjoying right now Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. I'm doing more work with teams, and I'm really seeing the value of understanding our working genius and how am I wired versus how are you wired, and what does our team need? What kind of meeting is this? Is this a meeting that's going to, kind of be targeted to this sort of thing or this? And I'm finding that like a really great concept for teams to be able to just understand how they can better work together. So
Absolutely.
that's one of my real favorite. Another one, I mean, I'm always reading. I can't remember that this one is Leadership Pipeline, but it's about the different skills we need at different levels of the organization. And how the skills that are needed as we're become that first line leader. Well, then that's different than as we move up through the organization. And what are those skills? Because sometimes it's not always clear. People, I work with a lot of people that want to get promoted to the next level, but they're not necessarily sure, how do I do that? How would I do that? So, so those are some, just a few of the books. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to a book. It's out of print now, but it was called the Cycle of Leadership. And it was about how that as you go through the different phases, that you revisit areas and as you go up, but there's other areas that you thought you were going to be dealing with that are lesser than what you were going through. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, and that reminds me too, then, that Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book one time called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and it's how behaviors that you have been perhaps serving you in your earlier part of your career, they're not always what's going to be needed at the next, at future stages of your career.
Right. Yeah. I mean, nowadays, I'm heavily dependent upon folks that are extremely talented in the technical arena because, they've spent their whole life in that. They grew up with a phone in their hand, I still remember phones with, telephone booths and lines that were party lines and not. So yeah. Well, this has been really great. Do you have a book or anything that's in the making coming up here soon, recording or anything?
I do. The people can always connect with me on my website at coachwende.com, www.coachwende.com. I am actually I'm in the final stages. I've written a Bible study to help people in dealing with suicide loss, because we lost our oldest son through suicide, and I'm connecting people with some of the many hard things that come up in that situation, and how do I turn to the Lord and navigate through what is for many the hardest thing they ever walk through in their life.
Absolutely. And it's such a challenge, and it's always present. Every generation faces it. It seems like we would have developed great tools, but every person that hits it, I hear the same thing from. I wasn't expecting this, and I don't know how to handle it.
Right. It's just it's a hard thing. So now, as wouldn't have picked this to be my journey, but I'm on it, and so I'm trying to figure out how to help other people on that same journey.
Absolutely. And so for all the listeners, we'll be putting in the links for all of these recommendations and her website and ways to contact with her. So Wende, I'm going to give you the last word before we shut off for the day.
Oh, well, thank you. This has been a great conversation. And I would just encourage everyone. Emotions they're not bad or good. They're just data. They're just information. They're just telling you that something is important to you, or something matters, or maybe something needs to be dealt with. So lean into them, and then you can manage them instead of them managing you.
Oh, that is such a value bomb right there. Well, Wendy, thank you. And you continue to bless others and continue to be blessed yourself.
Thank you, Tom. I enjoyed this.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to Morning Joe with Tom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. See you next time for more real-life stories and inspiration on Morning Joe with Tom.